Alrighty. Hey, fun. So, corrective taxes or regulate? Do we tax or do we regulate?
Both.
Yep, nope. He can't be bothered to come to this class.
That's probably like
Alright.
You
Corrective
just make
tax.
them feel weird. It's not their fault.
No, she's okay. Corrective taxes are better for the environment. They give them an incentive to continue reducing the pollution rather than to just pay the tax. Especially if they're publicly held companies. The shareholders want that greater incentive. They don't want to see that they're paying penalties. The reduction of pollution is going to be, in terms of business, an investment in the business. In many cases, it's going to be deductible and be incentivized that way. Whereas just paying the penalty is a straight out cost. It reduces the value to the shareholder. Yes, sir.
So when BP had their giant oil spill, like how much did it drop?
How much did their share price drop?
Yeah.
I don't recall. You could go back and look it up. It was a lot.
Okay, so the corrective tax says that you either fix it or we're gonna tax you for not fixing it?
Yes.
Okay.
Do they get taxed more? Wait,
Say what?
would they get taxed more after a thing like that?
No, tax law is what tax law is. They can be fined for an incident like that. But the tax law is the tax.
Wait, what about Keystone? Like, what?
They're probably going to be fined for it. They're also responsible for the expense of the cleanup. The larger issue with spills like BP and the Keystone spill is that, yeah, you can clean it up, but you can't ever undo the damage. The fish that were killed in the Gulf, the seafood that was destroyed, the income to the fishermen that was lost, you can't ever fully make that right.
Wait, they didn't have to pay reparations?
Yes, but I've got a fishing boat and I've got to make payments on it. Do you think that my claim filed with BP was processed and I had a check in my hand in time to make the payments on my fishing boat? Do you think that the bank reported that I didn't make the payment to the credit reporting agencies? Do you think that my credit ever gets fixed? My house payment, my car payment,
So it's
my kids' private school tuition, all of that stuff. All of the reparations and stuff don't happen instantaneously. They take time.
Gotcha.
And so that damage can never be completely undone.
Gotcha.
The whole generation, so yeah, I compensate you for the fish you didn't catch and couldn't sell. But what about the babies that those dead fish didn't have to be the next generation of fish to harvest? And the fact that there's depleted fisheries for however many fish generations there are, right? There's just less livelihood there for whatever period of time that is. And how do you put a figure on that?
Are there any other big oil spills in the world?
like the one that
Yeah,
just
we're-
happened, when they protested
What
it
about
for months and then
Actually, that
exactly
one-
when they protested it.
Actually, the one that happened in South Dakota on Keystone, is considered a minor spill.
Isn't that what they were protesting though? Begging them
They
not
were
to do it?
protesting the Keystone XL coming through over the Omaha line.
And so
And the
that's
Public
what
Service Commission approved the Keystone to come through Nebraska, but they rerouted it. And TransCanada is not happy with that, so we're not sure what's gonna happen.
What was the one in Alaska?
The Exxon Valdez,
Is that the biggest one?
I don't know what the largest one is. That one was so massive, it got a 2-page spread in my senior year yearbook. The Exxon Valdez did. Yeah. Alright. So, you gotta be careful with the amount of the corrective tax. You have to keep the corrective tax between doing nothing and the cost of actually reducing the pollution. You gotta keep it in between that in order to make it effective. Okay? If cleaner technology becomes available and it's less expensive than the tax, then corporations are going to invest in that cleaner technology. The problem with it is that if that technology is more expensive than the tax, then what am I gonna do? We'll pay the tax.
Is that why you have to have like super big taxes?
Well, it depends on what industry, how expensive the pollution is, how damaging the pollution is. I mean, it all, I hate that answer, but it depends. It depends specifically on what you're talking about. All right, so the gas tax is a corrective tax. It's going after 3 specific externalities associated with the consumption and burning of gas. Congestion is a problem with the burning of gas. You don't think about that. Your mind's going to pollution. But the cheaper gas is, right, the less expensive gas is, the more people who can afford to buy the gas. Meaning the more people who are driving, the more they're driving, the more cars there are on the road, right? How many of you have driven the interstate between Omaha and Lincoln? Okay. How many lanes is it? 3 each way, so 6 lanes. When I started driving, it was 4. No, interstates are never just 2 lanes. That's a highway. Interstate was 4. Okay? Gas prices being relatively low, and what did you say?
I said maybe back when you rode buggies it was only 1. I don't know. God dang, she's how you're doing that. She's gonna come where it is. Don't do it.
I ever seen the Flintstones?
Yes.
Yeah, there were no buggies. It was the bridges were all Brontos. You just had to get them to put their head down. What? Thank you. 72nd Street, when I was your age, had just newly been paved. It was gravel before that. What? Gravel. And then it was 2 lanes. And you drive a 4-lane road with turn lanes, right? And stop lights. 84th Street used to be 2 lanes. Okay? More cars, more congestion, more general public expense paid for with other taxes to expand the roads. Okay? Accidents. The more cars on the road, the more congestion, the more accidents. Yes?
How big was this high school?
How big was this high school? It was a 3-year high school. My graduating class was about 330. They, between my junior and senior year, we got that back hallway, the science rooms and stuff.
That wasn't there.
Back there?
No, back there. No, that wasn't there. The North Gym wasn't there.
The front entrance.
We had the annex. That was where you went out, where you took drafting with Coach Weaver, and where the auto shop was.
You can't even tell about
Yeah, the front entrance.
I have a brick. That's the old front entrance from that one.
I have a
Yeah.
it's not on,
So do I. All right. Larger vehicles, which are less fuel efficient and burn more gas, cause more damage in an accident. Would you like to be in the smart car that runs up against the Ford F-250? No, you wouldn't. There are other costs associated with that. Besides the medical bills, there's the higher insurance rates, the cost of repair, et cetera, okay? So if we keep fuel expensive, people will buy smaller cars, more fuel efficient cars, fewer people will drive cars, they'll drive less, okay? So on and so forth, okay? And then of course, everybody's favorite externality for fossil fuels, pollution. Of the ones that you think about on a day-to-day basis, congestion is probably up there first, right? How long is it going to take me to get somewhere? What time of the day is it? How much traffic is there? How often do you think about the potentiality of a car accident?
Never. Oh, I do it all.
Only after one's been close.
Yeah.
After somebody turns in front of you, after you have to nosedive following
Or like-
somebody.
Like I just had my accident, so it's like every day it's
My
thinking
niece-
about like about to get another accident.
My niece over the weekend on Sunday night was in a 4-car pileup driving between Dallas and Oklahoma City. She was the second car in 4-car. Yeah.
Dude, I got
Do you ever when you're sitting somewhere in the driveway, listening to the end of the song, think about what you're doing to the environment?
Yeah, cause I turn off my agenda.
You just let the battery run.
Wow.
I mean, you're not doing this for the environment, you're gonna see gas.
Yeah,
Alright.
I don't.
So let's practice!
Yes.
Lowering sulfur dioxide emissions.
We didn't know any of the pros for regulation.
What is it?
We'll get there.
I just made a t-shirt and I had one side.
We'll get there. Alright. Acme
Is that still
and
good?
US what?
Is Acme still a thing?
Acme's always just a made up thing.
Oh. And so I was like, oh, the Wile E. Coyote always working.
Wile E. Coyote and Marvin the Martian. He always orders his disintegrators from Acme. Alright, Acme and US Electric run coal burning power plants. Each emits 40 tons of sulfur dioxide a month. So our total emissions are 80 tons a month. That's a lot of sulfur dioxide, except that's not a lot of sulfur dioxide when you consider global emissions. Alright, our goal is to reduce sulfur dioxide emissions by 25% down to 60 tons a month.
Stop it.
Acme's cost is $100 a ton. US Electric's is $200 a ton. Okay? So we have a goal industry-wide. There's only two companies in our industry, and we know their individual costs. Okay? So here we're going to figure out, should we tax them or regulate them? Okay? We can regulate. Both of you, we'll divide you guys. You guys are Acme, you guys are US Electric.
Yeah, we are.
Acme and US Electric. You guys have to reduce your emissions by 25%. You guys have to reduce your emissions by 25%. That's option one.
This is not really.
Figure out how much it's going to cost you guys, US Electric, to reduce your emissions by 25%. Figure out how much it's going to cost you to reduce your emissions by 25%. Wait, $100 per ton?
200.
Come on.
No, because there's two in each.
You have to reduce your emissions by 25%. So you need to get from your 30 tons down to your 40 tons down to your 30 tons. You gotta get rid of 10 tons.
So it's 10 times 100.
So it's how much is it? Yeah. Acme says it's going to cost them $1,000 to reduce their emissions. US Electric, how much for you?
2,000.
2,000. Wow, you guys are mathematician wizards.
I know.
All right. Bam. All right. Well, that's fair, right?
No.
Yeah, that's fair. You both had to reduce by the same amount. It's nobody's fault that you guys are less efficient or more polluting or whatever it is that makes it more expensive for you to reduce.
Yeah.
Maybe your plant's older, it's gonna cost more to rebuild, whatever. Okay, so the total cost is gonna be $3,000 to cut emissions by 25%. We have no basis for comparison, we don't know whether that's a decent figure or a poor one. We can do it through tradable pollution permits instead. You still each emit 40 tons a month. We still want to reduce by 25%. We're going to issue 60 total tradable pollution permits. Each of you gets 30 permits. Okay? Then we're going to establish a market through which you can trade those permits. You can use all of your permits and emit 30 tons of pollution. You can emit less than 30 tons and sell your leftover permits. Or you can purchase extra permits and emit more than 30 tons. So if you both decide to go ahead and emit 30 tons, what's your cost going to be, Acme? And what's your cost going to be, US Electric? So we haven't changed anything. So it's this market in trading the permits that makes this valuable. What do you predict? Why would Acme sell some to US Electric? Because you can afford You can afford to get rid of some of them, so long as they're willing to pay
More than $100.
more than $100 per permit
200.
and less than 200.
One in nine.
199 is still a win for US Electric. 101 is still a win for Acme. Alright?
One.
So, let's figure it out if we charge them 150 each.
Can we negotiate this?
Yeah.
Maybe we just, well, I'll do 125.
Wait, so we're selling, yeah, $100 and then good old George Washington.
Yes, so here's the deal. You still have to get the pollution down, industry-wide. But look at what their proposal is. You guys are gonna sell 20 permits to them.
Whoa. So 10.
No, we're selling 10.
You have 20.
Oh, okay, sorry. My bad. You're gonna sell 10 to them.
Okay.
How's that play out?
They end up $2,000.
Acme's gonna sell 10 permits and get $1,500, which means they still have to reduce their emissions, don't they?
Yeah, but they're
By how much? By 10 tons still. What's that gonna cost them? 1,000. So even after they do that, they end up
Do we have to reduce
ahead
it?
by 500.
Do we have to reduce it by 20 tons now?
Yeah.
Because we had the,
Yeah,
we had 30.
yeah, now they
We
reduced
just
by
sold
20
10,
tons.
so we have to give another 20.
It doesn't matter because we're just doing
It's, you're doing 40. You have
Yes.
40 tons of emissions.
You
You're
get
covered for 20 through your permits.
30. You're covered to 30 for your permit.
They sold 10 to you.
So now
Oh.
we have to get it from 40 to 20, so it costs,
40 to 30.
but we just sold 10 of our permits.
You only had to get
So 40 to
Which
20.
means now we're
You're
at
right,
20.
you're right.
So they lose $500 instead of losing 1,000.
Let's work through the whole math. So you use 20 and emit 20 tons, and you then have to spend 2,000 to reduce your emissions to the 20 tons. So what is your total cost, Acme?
$500.
$500. Are you still ahead? US Electric, what was it gonna cost you to reduce your emissions by 10 tons?
2,000.
What did you just pay?
1,500.
So you're ahead by,
So now.
so you're each $500 better off than you were under the taxation method.
Trading makes people better off. Did you know that?
I am familiar with that concept, I've heard it somewhere before. They spent $1,500, so they're $500 to the better than they were under taxation. You guys spent 2,000 but made 1,500, so you're $500 in the hole. But compared to where you were with taxation, you're $500 ahead.
Because we were gonna be 1,000 or like in the hole, but now we're in 500.
And the environment still wins.
Kind of.
So the total cost of achieving the goal now is $2,000. The total cost of achieving the goal under taxation was
3,000.
$3,000. $1,000 in taxes and $2,000 in taxes. Goal still achieved. Total economic cost lower.
But this time there's no tax.
There is no tax revenue from the penalty taxation.
They still get taxed from whatever they.
But we've saved each company money, meaning that there's going to be greater profit, which we can tax.
Just tax where you want to tax.
And tax revenue also creates deadweight loss, and no deadweight loss was created in this. Always. Alright, so tradable pollution permits, now that we know that that's a plus. Here's the other side of your chart.
The regulations.
The taxation was regulation.
But we said, do we tax or regulate?
So how do you regulate? Through taxation.
Yeah, because
Sorry.
You made that, okay, when we went through lecture, you made that sound like there was two different things. You either regulate it or you tax it. And you said, which one's better?
Sorry.
And now you just said we do both.
So, you regulate and penalize through taxation, or you regulate and make it possible through permits. You're gonna regulate either way, but do you do it by taxation, or do you do it by finding other alternative solutions? And for pollution, one of them is tradable permits. I apologize. Alright. So this is just bullet pointing out what we just figured out through actual practice and application, right? If it's less expensive for you to reduce pollution, you're gonna do that and sell your permits for a profit, essentially. And the folks for whom it's more expensive to reduce pollution, they're gonna buy those permits. But ultimately, the environment wins because you only allow enough permits to still achieve the end result.
So the environment wins in both of these?
Yes. It's just which one can we have through which solution can we have the environment win and do the least economic damage?
Couldn't our company, in theory, if we wanna have a monopoly on the market, not sell them any of our stuff?
So
And
they
drive
have
them
to,
bankrupt?
yeah. So what's the incentive to trade with them instead of
Cause you were better off personally too.
Yeah, it profits your company.
to have them there?
In the short run it does, but then if in the long run, if we
drive
bankrupt them, our company's gonna be way better off.
Because then we're the
Now we have
only-
a monopoly on the market.
Yeah, but now you're also having to reduce prices.
You're also assuming that you can ramp up your productivity to include the amount of energy that they were producing at the same pollution output.
If we ran a bankrupt, we buy
Wait, isn't that what the bill is?
Yeah, but then there you any in that. Now you're just as polluting and face the same problems, and you don't have anybody to trade pollution.
But then
Now
once
you
your
face the
supply
higher
stays
cost
the
of reducing,
What's your
but now you still face the higher cost of reducing.
Say you didn't buy them. Say you only had your company, your supply stayed the same, but when you're doing.
How's your supply gonna stay the same?
It's just like the full time, when they go
No,
up.
because your company's supply,
No, our supply that we're supplying stays
Yeah.
the same. Like, the demand would go up.
the demand curve hasn't changed. The
Just the
supply in the
suppliers.
market has decreased because now they're changing the number of sellers in the market.
It's
So now
So all the general
there's
electric-
essentially electric shortages and brownouts. You've done
This
tremendous
isn't
damage.
something you wanna
All
try and
because of you.
monopolize it.
Yeah, no.
Wait, so then.
And keep in mind though that in the United States, power companies are publicly held utilities, meaning they are already monopolies. Who do you guys get your electric from?
I don't know.
Who do you get your cable from?
DirecTV.
Cox, CenturyLink, DirecTV, Dish, right?
That free
Okay, so if you've got Cox and you get ticked off at them, do you have a choice? Do you go somewhere else? Alright. I really dislike OPPD. Their power's been unreliable. It's been out twice in the past month, and I think the rates are too high. I'm dropping OPPD.
Satellite.
What's your option?
You use.
Work on your own.
You don't have another option.
Yeah.
Power companies are
You're like,
public utilities.
So what stops us from raising prices?
Because they're public utilities, we elect their board of directors and they are public utilities. They're not
Now you
privately
just have
held,
to hand
publicly
them.
traded,
Nobody's
they're
just
public
having any
utilities. Lactose is the same way for natural gas.
Yes.
Oh.
Then you gotta have power to,
Alright, so in the real world, we have traded sulfur dioxide permits in the US for, what is that, 30 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Nitrogen oxide is what produces acid rain. They've traded those in the northeastern United States for 25 years.
15. It's 18 years.
I'm lost.
Okay. Alright, thank you.
I don't even know what the question was.
See, math in my head, I made this disclaimer at the beginning of the year, but in math class I wouldn't be teaching it, right? Alright, carbon emissions permits have been traded in Europe since about the beginning of the EU. If this trade is happening in places that have overarching governing bodies, and it's persisted this long, it's working. curve for these pollution permits as demand for ability to pollute. Okay? That curve is going to look just like any other demand curve. The more expensive it is to you to pollute, the less you want to pollute. Okay? Same demand curve as any other demand curve. Okay? When you apply a tax to the price of polluting, what does it do to the demand curve? It shifts it to the right. Makes it more expensive to pollute. Okay? Reduces the quantity which you want to pollute with. The tradable system has the same impact on the demand for pollution as the tax does, without necessarily changing the cost of polluting directly. Okay. So, back to the question yesterday, how much do you tax? How do you know how much to tax? The tradable permit solution is the answer to that. That tradable permit solution says we don't know how much to tax per ton of pollutant, but the market will know how much to tax. But we can't let the market set a tax, we let the market set the price for polluting through the tradable permits. And the market set the price for you guys, set it at 150. It could have set it at 125 or 170, right? But it goes in the middle, where it's most advantageous to both parties. Does that answer it for you?
Yep.
That is the second reason why tradable permits are the better solution than taxation. Because taxation, the government is taking a wild guess and setting a figure. They don't know. It would cost a lot of money to study the industry, to try and get businesses to release proprietary information about the cost of reducing their pollution, et cetera, to try and figure out what the amount of that tax should be. And they might figure it out for 3 of the 7 companies in that industry and miss completely. But if you create the market for tradable permits, then the companies have to figure out the cost. All right. Government shouldn't be messing with this. Shouldn't be an issue. No one should be able to purchase the right to pollute our environment. The environment should be preserved at all costs. As economists, how do you feel about that statement? You're a hippie? It's stupid. Well, it's certainly economically damaging to take that stance, right? If globally we were to put a prohibition on the burning of fossil fuels, coal and oil and natural gas, gone. You have to go wind and solar. What have we just done to the global economy?
Screwed ourselves.
We've grounded every airplane. We have docked every cargo ship.
Every car.
We've destroyed all national defense.
Sail cargo ships.
So we're going back to the schooner. Yo ho ho.
Get on the back and start
Bring me
kicking.
some rickets and some scurvy, matey. Okay. Well, I need me some oxen to harvest with too, because we just destroyed food production.
Is that like cut
No more combines. Huh?
You know what?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have nuclear power, wind, and solar.
You're gonna get it out.
What are we
It's running water.
Exactly.
Oh, and wait a minute. How are we teaching school in this building? I don't know. Because the lights just went out.
Going to Canada.
The smartboard just went off.
Candles would work. We can't burn kerosene lanterns.
That'd be later.
Can't we
Kerosene is oil by
Whale oil.
Whale oil.
Kill all the whales.
Yeah.
Honestly, we should try to get
Population will drop, so food production will drop after like 15 years.
Thomas Malthus would be thrilled by that.
Wood and sticks.
Guys, would be thrilled by that. By the way, MRIs
All magnets.
gone, powered by electricity, CAT scans, gone. Operating rooms, no more ultraviolet light.
How was it?
You have
Operating
general
room, fire whale oil lamps and candles.
And
We have
turn up the
general
lights
safety.
on
Yeah,
fire to
population
collapse
is,
in their body.
population is generally going to decline, and you would see
Survival of
most
the
likely
fittest.
the reinstitution of slavery in places.
Yeah.
Survival of the fittest.
People would be enslaved.
Davis.
Oh my God, these
Not necessarily on a racial basis. I'm not talking about U.S. slavery. I'm talking about the concept of slavery.
Yeah, I would definitely go back.
That's what was really happening.
So, you can't put a price on the environment. Mother Nature gave us this earth and we gotta protect it at all costs. Okay?
Stop, don't ever say that again.
Wait, if you can't put a price on the argument,
Stop.
Well, no, this is the however to that objection. So,
Bro, I didn't set anyone up for any.
get your feet off my desk.
Just put your ankles on it and have it be. I do it like every day. Lorraine, ankles on, feet off. She can't do that. Yeah.
It's like
Because there was a lot of Lorraines at one time, so that was the only way I could get a hold of her.
Alright, so, the counter to that argument is, yeah, but there's trade-offs here. Sure, you can have the purest, cleanest oceans and air, but you gotta give something up. And we just evaluated the cost of giving up all fossil fuels. How many of you found that to be an unsatisfactory option?
Great answer.
Yeah, I have a
My parents be like,
I'm go for it.
Don't lean back in your chair.
yeah, no, great
I have
answer.
a
Just
question.
piddle around.
What?
What kind of fuel what kind of stuff do we burn? How do we power Omaha? Is that all fossil?
Well, Fort Calhoun is powering down, so that means Brownsville and the North Omaha Power Plant coal. Yeah.
Can you still burn wood?
No.
Your house is probably heated by natural gas, fossil fuel.
Ooh, deforest everything.
Guess what? Maintenance vehicles.
Lauren, you already look beautiful. Put your phone on.
It's like, it was like a hash, but like a
Every
crumb.
10 minutes she's like, and then she does this. This is all cute, locked into them.
When we do things through a market-based approach, like the tradable permits, it reduces the cost of the environmental protection. And theoretically then should reduce the population's demand for that environmental protection. No. Because the less costly you make it to protect the environment, the more feasible you make it to protect the environment while maintaining a relatively stable market cost for goods and services, pushing it out of the people's forefront of their mind.
Is that true?
Why would we say that if
Yeah.
it anywhere?
It actually happens.
You like Terra Nova.
So guys, how many of you just heard what Hannah asked? She asked, does that actually happen? I will counter with this. What was the temperature yesterday?
70.
What's the forecast all week?
Delicious.
Super
Nice.
warm.
What's the forecast next week?
Super cold.
Warmer and rain.
That's
Yes, I
insane.
love it.
Let me point your attention to the date on the calendar.
It snowed on
Nebraska's turning
now
into
we're not gonna have
Texas.
snow in December.
Does that actually work?
I'm sorry.
No,
we're
we're
still
still
I
told you guys this
answered
before.
the question. You didn't my
No,
question.
I'm trying to.
I know.
Alright, so private solutions exist for externalities. The golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
Oh, that's
This
rebellious.
dude.
Alright?
As you do to yourself.
Charities. Charities. The World Wildlife Fund. What is the ASPCA? The Sarah McLachlan Arms of an Angel commercial.
You donate now.
I saw a great tweet the other day. It said I was driving down the road, Arms of an Angel came on, I reflexively turned in and adopted 3 kittens and a dog.
How did you know?
Yeah. contracts between market participants and the affected bystanders. Okay? The Coe's theorem says if the parties who are impacted can privately negotiate, they can solve it without governmental intervention. They can solve it without governmental intervention. Gavin lives next door to me. We don't talk about it in public a lot. Gavin lives next door to me. He has 3 Newfoundlands. They bark
awesome.
non-stop. Woo, woo, woo. Right?
Oh, is that again? I'm kidding.
When all 3 of them are going, the dishes literally rattle off of the table. It's terrible. Terrible. Keeps me up all night
My
long.
dog's Chpt.
So Gavin and I talked. We tried to determine what the cost of the value of those dogs was to Gavin versus what the value of my sleep was to me. Well, we figured out that Gavin really loves those Newfies. He wants to keep them. Was it Baxter, Buster, and Baby? Is that, okay. Baby's the biggest one too. It's kind of doesn't make any sense. All right. So Gavin agreed to pay for the cost of better windows in my house to kill the sound and another layer of insulation and re-siding the house. That's how much his dogs were worth to him. That expense taken care of, I get to sleep through the night and he gets to keep Baxter, Buster, and Baby.
Yeah, right. I love baby.
Rather than me just picking up the phone and calling the Humane Society and saying these dogs are driving me nuts or calling the police and calling it a noise violation, I approached him like a human being, like 2 private parties, and said, hey, we got a problem here, can we work something out? As opposed to what some folks in the news have done recently, which is throw poisoned meat into people's backyards.
Nuh-uh.
Or hamburger with fish hooks in it.
There
There's another charming one.
There was a
I
there
don't
was
know.
a
I just
dog
want to
park
talk.
on the
Just give me
base
the address. I'll just
hospital,
talk.
and then he closed it down
Yep.
because someone kept throwing tennis balls soaked in formaldehyde over in
Yep.
the dog park.
Just give me the address.
All right, so here we go.
Now
Here
it's-
is the example as presented by the book.
I'm gonna throw it back at
Nick's dog is Spot. Spot.
Why is
Spot barks. So this is going back to ask your grandparents. When they were in school, they probably had a primer, a reading book, Dick and Jane. Dick does this, Jane does that. See Dick run, see Jane sew. Okay. So Dick has a dog named Spot. See Spot bark. Okay. Spot's barking disturbs Jane, who lives next door to Dick.
Andrew,
The socially efficient outcome maximizes Dick and Jane's well-being. It's going to make them both better off, or better off than the socially inefficient outcome, okay? If Dick values having Spot more than Jane values peace and quiet, Dick keeps Spot. Okay? The private... Andrew, do you need to step out?
Yes.
The Coe's theorem says the private market is going to work this out efficiently. So, Dick's benefit to having Spot, $500. The cost to Jane of Spot's barking, $800. Q, you want to look this up on your phone? What's the difference?
I'm on it.
Okay? Socially efficient outcome here. Dick values Spot less than Jane values peace and quiet, so Spot should go to the pound.
Yeah, right.
Should go live on the farm.
Your car's too
The
fast.
private outcome is Jane pays Dick $600 to get rid of Spot. Spot maybe gets to stay. Dick takes the $600 and has his vocal cords clipped or something. I don't know.
Can you do that?
I have no idea.
Yeah,
They're both better off.
Okay.
Okay. The private outcome is the efficient outcome. Second option. Dick values Spot at $1,000. Jane still values her peace and quiet at $800. The socially efficient outcome, see Spot stay. He gets to stay because Dick values him more. Okay. Jane isn't going to pay more than $800. Dick won't get rid of Spot for less than $1,000, so Spot's going to stay. What's the problem with that?
Then she can just call.
Jane's still pissed.
Yeah.
Right?
So
She
would
is
you
still
care?
not happy.
Wait, so I can do this with Christmas lights?
Theoretically, the private outcome is equivalent to the efficient outcome.
Until it's not.
The problem is, how did Dick and Jane arrive at these dollar amounts?
just personal.
They just said
There's opinion.
Do you suppose that either one of them screamed, yelled, slammed things around
Probably do.
Yes.
Right. when they were talking? Do you suppose it was all, well, I very much value sleeping, and Dick was like, but I love my dog and having him sleep at my feet by the fire. It's so calming and relaxing. No, there was, your dog is keeping me away from my bed. Right? There was screaming, there was yelling, there were eggs thrown.
I see where it is like they each had a napkin over drinks, and then he goes,
They're
"What's your
not
value?" And then they
dating,
write it
they're
down
neighbors.
and slides over. No, like a business thing.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Here's what I can do.
Here's what I can do. Slide it over. She reads it. Not good enough. Slides it back.
Jane has the legal right to peace and quiet, while Dick values Spot at $800 and Jane values her, or the cost to Jane is $500. Who's going to win here when we introduce law into it?
Neither.
Jane.
So much money.
Jane has the legal right to peace and quiet.
Yeah.
So the legal right is worth $1,000.
Socially efficiently, Spot should stay.
But
Yes.
The private outcome, Dick hands Jane $600 or pays for better windows, right?
Mm-hmm.
Compensates her loss and keeps his dog. Until Jane has a baby and the baby's awoken by it
and she
and
gives
her
us $6
cost goes up.
back, and then they're
Right.
even.
Yes.
If you have like actual paperwork signed out where like you make sure like that's legal, can you show that if she complains about it? and say,
Yes. Absolutely.
Awesome.
Wait, what
Okay.
can you do?
The point here is, regardless of legal rights, if you let the private market work it out, it's going to be efficient. All right. You live in Green Valley, and you have Blue Lake. Each of you values swimming in Blue Lake at
A very high amount.
$100 apiece, right?
Yes.
All right.
So that's a high price.
Uh-oh. Mr. Rahachik built a factory next door, and it pollutes the lake. Our Blue Lake is kind of now blue-gray lake. Okay?
Red.
He's gonna have to pay $50,000 to buy the equipment to keep from polluting Green Valley's Blue Lake.
Yes.
What would the Coes-like private solution be?
Green Valley pays for
We pay 'em
That we each put up $50
Yeah.
to buy the anti-polluting machinery.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
Yeah, we get to keep our lake, he gets to keep his factory. Woo.
Is there any?
Why might that solution not work in the real world?
Because like
Because not
legally they
everybody-
can't just pollute.
Not everybody
Don't
wants
you have
to
to have
put up
permits
50
to
bucks.
pollute?
We're not bringing law into it.
Not everyone wants to put up 50 bucks.
Not everybody wants to put up the $50.
So some would have to.
Not everybody could. We've got retirees on fixed incomes that are at $50. We've got people who are unemployed. So then should everybody else have to put up more? And then, well, why should the retirees get to swim? They didn't pay. So now let's put up a fence around the lake. And
Offense.
transaction costs keep private solutions from working. It's harder to negotiate and figure it out. Stubbornness. Jane hates that bleeping barking dog next door, and it's got to go. I don't care if you buy my house and I move, your dog still has to go. Hate dogs. Stubbornness.
Shoot the dog.
Oh, coordination problems, and this is our problem here in Green Valley. How do you get 1,000 people, pay the same amount, by the right date? This is why senior skip days, when their imagination where everybody skips and they can't punish anybody, right? That's why it doesn't work. Coordination problems. You can't ever get everybody to go along.
Okay, guys. Juniors in here. Everybody, you gotta go along with that.
You're gonna
I think
skip
I'm saying that.
today.
Yeah, but until you have the 2 kids who get threatened by AP psychology, that
It's
they
like a
get
thing.
them into the
It's
final.
like a thing now, guys.